Welcome everybody to Programming Fundamentals Week 3. This week we're going to have a look at methods, or we've been calling them up until now functions. So what have we been doing so far? So in our last class we had a look at variables and its scope. So we talked about how a variable could have a local scope, and that's local to the block of code in which it was created, or how it could have a global scope, and that's when we created the variable outside of the functions that we are creating. So outside of setup and outside of draw, or mouse pressed, or whichever mouse events that we were using, and it meant that all of those functions could access that variable. So we had a look at the scope. We talked about hard coding and how we can use variables if we do, to get rid of the whole area of hard coding. And when we use variables, it means that we can change the value in one place and we don't have to change it everywhere we had it hard coded. So that's what we looked at as regards variables. Then we got into the whole area of looping, and we learned about while loops, for loops, and do while loops. We talked about nesting, and we said that nesting was when we put a loop inside a loop, or we put an if statement inside an if statement. So it's when we nest our statements. And then we explored the beauty of the infinite loop, and we said that the infinite loop was usually something that we don't mean to do. It's when our program executes without an end. Okay, there was a few help videos last week. So there was the help videos as regards the bouncing ball and the moving line, and there was also the chessboard. So we said at the time that they're great to have those help videos, but to use them as a resource, not to start with. So it's best if you get started yourself and then come back to them and try and see can you do the code. Okay, so just to use them, not to rely on them. Okay. Today, yes, what are we going to do today? Well, today we're going to learn that we've been calling methods all wrong. We've been calling them functions. Today we're going to change that terminology and we're going to call them methods. And I'll get to why we're changing the terminology in a few minutes. We're going to talk about the signature of those methods and what that means. Return types, the name, the parameters. These are all things that you've been doing already. It's just now we're going to give you a little bit more education onto what each component is. We're going to talk about the body and how the body of our method is the code that we want to be executed when this method is called. So again, new words coming into our terminology. We're going to talk about calling, definition. We're going to look at more mouse events. Some of the examples that we're going to look at this week are I's and X's. So again, our knowledge is improving. We're taking what we've learned before. We're taking the loops that we looked at last week. We're taking the variables and the scope, and we're pushing them on a little bit more. So we're going to write our own methods. So we're going to write a method for a red rectangle. We're going to show how we can pass it different information to make it change its size and location. And we're going to have a look at a method called times 2. And that times 2 is going to do all the work itself, and then another one where it's going to return a value. So there's a lot of work today that we've got to get through. So stick with us and we'll get going.